Why does one bad innings ruin your whole week?
Why do other people's opinions feel so important?
And what should a coach actually say after a player makes a mistake?
We're answering all of that from your questions in this week's episode.
I'm Nathan Wood.
And I'm Briony Brock.
Welcome to the Cricket Mind podcast. Okay, I'm very glad to say that this week we have Briony back on the pod, and we're going to use this episode to answer some questions that our lovely listeners have sent in, of which we have 5. So, shall we get stuck into them, Briony?
Yes, let's.
Right, so the first question comes from Nikita on Facebook, and her question is this. I started playing cricket a few years ago at my local club. We entered a women's development league, and it's really fun. But I hate that everything is scored and public on play cricket. I worry so much about what others think about my scores. I am constantly torn between feeling and making progress and being proud, and then knowing that people will be following our games and looking at my stats. How can I overcome this? Briony, what do you think?
Well, I think it is such a common feeling that people experience, probably at all levels of the game to varying degrees. I think we could probably do a whole episode on play cricket and the impact that's had. I know we've talked about it and about what life was like before play cricket. Obviously, leagues like this would have probably been done on paper, but I know you've talked about there being CFAX.
Yeah. So for those listeners, and probably most listeners, I don't know what the age profile is, but in the 80s and 90s, there used to be a service on the telly called CFAX. And it was, what was it? It was a text-based service. And in the Lancashire dressing room at the time, and I think in every single county dressing room at the time, there was a telly in the corner and CFAX was always on. And it showed the stats from the leading run scorers and the leading wicket takers in county cricket. So that was a pre play cricket kind of thing. Not very sophisticated, but yeah, we had CFAX.
Well, it just shows really, doesn't it, that cricket has always been a stats-heavy game. It's drawn in maybe people who have a tendency to like those things, but it also creates this extra level of pressure at every level. You know, I know children who use it quite a lot because it's used for most children's games. Parents even showing their children, so they're the highest run scorer in the club, waving it around, and it's a real challenge for people who are playing cricket at the moment in this country. I think, as with a lot of things, it can be useful to think about how you're measuring success for yourself. I think this is a great time of year to have a think about what you want to get out of this season and think what success looks like for you at the level that you're at. That might be you want to pick up the ball more cleanly when you're fielding. You might want to recover well after bowling a wide, or you might want to better manage the nerves that you feel when you go out to bat. Measures of success that are within your control and things that you can really hone in on. And then after each game, you can either write down or just think about, how did I do in that measure of success? You know, that's not runs, that's not wickets, that's nothing like that. That's your things that you're working on. And play cricket's not going to disappear, but it's about shifting the focus to your development, particularly if that's kind of the area that you're working on and the stage of your cricket. I would also say with play cricket, you don't have to look at it. So if it is something that feels unhealthy or a bit of a problem, I would encourage you to delete it if that's what you want to do, or not check those scores, not kind of fuel that fire. And And I guess finally, I would say most people are probably less concerned with what you're doing. If they're checking it regularly, they are quite probably checking their own stats. They're not checking like the sixth team of the club or the women's development team. They're probably looking at where they fit in and how they've been doing. But I would say it's a very valid feeling, that being torn between the metrics and then feeling proud of yourself.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is that cricket is a very stats-based game. It always has been, hasn't it? And players from the beginning of time, well, obviously not beginning of time, but the beginning of cricket time, have been judged on their numbers. Think about Don Bradman, back in the 1930s, averaging 99.94. That's etched into people's memories, isn't it?
Mm.
So stats have always kind of dominated the game, but play cricket has taken it to a different level, hasn't it? Because not only have you got the stats and more of them, but now you can see clips, can't you, of your dismissal or somebody getting your wicket. And with this visibility does come or can come a bit more judgment, either internally or externally. So yeah, I can understand the challenge that it presents to lots of people. And I think what you were saying actually is really helpful. You're naturally going to look at your stats, aren't you? And that's going to draw your attention. But if you can get your mind to a point where you're actually thinking about how you can impact the game in lots of different ways, and that could be bringing energy in the field, it could be being a supportive teammate, it could be backing up and running your singles really quickly. I don't know, but all these things, they don't have to have a metric next to them for you to have a real impact in the game. And I think that I have seen signs actually, Bryony, in some teams that I've worked with, particularly professional teams, where there is a bit of a shift to not this player averages 50 and so he should be in the team, but actually this player has impact on the
Mm.
side. So maybe, we're slowly shifting, but
Mm.
a long way to go, I suggest. But I think your advice is pretty sound there.
Yeah, it is a difficult one. And the stats don't show everything either. They really don't show the full picture of the game and the progress that you're making. And I think particularly for children, it can get quite easy. I know this isn't a child that's written in, but it can be quite easy to get caught up in those stats ahead of, but actually, did I play well? Am I making progress over the course of the season? Or am I a bit fixated on being the highest run scorer or whatever? So I think just having a bit of a think about at this time of year, what do I want to get out of my season? Where do I want to really improve on last year?
I've got a question for you, actually. Who do you think
Mm.
actually likes stats?
Um, the people that are probably, I don't know even if the people that are doing well, because then you're always chasing that feeling that you're doing well. I think maybe parents whose child's doing well.
Yeah, and performance analysts, I guess.
Performance analysts look more at matchups and ways that wickets are taken as well now. They're not
Mm,
going to be looking, well, he's got loads of wickets.
mm, yeah. I suspect most people don't like stats. I mean, maybe those who've scored 100 that day, it's a fleeting feeling, is it? But like you said, the pressure's on next week, isn't it? Can I replicate that? So,
Yeah.
shall we ban play cricket, Bryony?
Yeah, I think we should. I like paper scoring
Do
as
you?
well. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, next question. So this one comes from David Finch and it's sent in by email. Your story at the start of the last episode about dropping a catch and the coach kicking his cap around the boundary really resonated with me. I'm a junior coach and I sometimes struggle to know how to react when a player makes a silly mistake in a game. I don't want to ignore it, but I also don't want to diminish their confidence. What's the best way for coaches to respond in those moments?
Hmm. Well, I definitely wouldn't recommend having the same reaction as my old Lancashire coach. Um, I think these situations show how difficult it can be for a cricket coach, a sports coach in the heat of a game, because sport, especially when you're invested in it, it can be highly emotional. But showing that emotion can sometimes be really detrimental to the team or the player that you're coaching, because in those moments, young players are not just competing in the game, they're also learning about the game. And part of this learning is about making mistakes. So I think that the best thing you can do as a coach when a player does make a mistake, and all players will make mistakes, is to regulate yourself first, because that initial reaction, that will become part of their learning process if they see it. And I think it's important to bear in mind that no matter how annoyed, how frustrated you are as a coach, that player will be much more annoyed and frustrated with himself or herself. So if your response is one of high emotion, sarcasm, frustration, anger, then that player will feel that instantly and powerfully. And this often can create a fear of failure in the player, or at least more hesitation in that game. So I'd like to know what you think, Bryony, but I think for me, the best reaction in those moments is to be calm and it's to be neutral. What would you say?
Yeah, it's funny actually, this question, because today I was at a tournament at Lord's, an indoor schools tournament, under 11 girls. I was with a team of year sixes, and quite a lot of mistakes going on there. And I find the kind of way, particularly for a drop catch, the best way for me to channel my frustration is to go, "Oh, great effort, Nathan, great effort." Because it's like, it overrides my frustration immediately. It's like my default response. I don't know if it's the best. I mean, what's the best? Who knows what's the best way to react? But it stops me becoming frustrated because it's positive. It's an automatic thing I do every time. So it's like my mouth just does it. And I think it also praises the effort, doesn't it? Like, they have gone for the catch. That's better than them just kind of watching it. And I like to think it's encouraging, versus sometimes the silence can be quite deafening.
Yeah, I think you need to know the player, don't you? I mean, one thing that I used to hate as a player, actually, was if a coach was supportive to me or gave me some kind of praise when I'd done badly. I actually just
Yeah,
preferred it if he or she was quiet and let me
I have
get
heard
on
that,
and then
yeah.
have a conversation. But I do think there's some players who do thrive on that support. So I think you've got to know your player, don't you? Maybe I was just a bit of a pain, a bit odd, but yeah, that's how I would say. Well, one thing that I would say is, I'm not saying that you should, as a coach, ignore the mistake completely. I mean, your job as a coach, it is to support the player, which involves helping them to learn from that mistake. But I think it's the timing, isn't it, that's important. You probably don't want to do that coaching bit when both you and the player are in a heightened state emotionally. You probably want to do it when they've calmed down, when you're both in more of a logical state of mind, which may be the next day. It might be the next coaching session. So I guess in a nutshell, stay composed when they make the mistake, and then do the coaching bit when you're in a better frame of mind.
Definitely separating the emotion from the instruction is really, really important. And I think, you see it quite a lot where people go straight into to fix with an instruction, but it's not going to go in at that stage, is it?
No, you've said that much more eloquently and succinctly than I did, but yeah, perfect. Right, third question, and this comes from Caroline, who sent this in from Instagram. My son really struggles with his batting from a mental perspective. He is always upset when he gets out, and I try to tell him what he's done wrong so that he can learn for next time, but he just gets annoyed. It can ruin his whole day. Any advice on what to do? Well, he's definitely not alone, is he, Brian? I used to sulk for a week when I, never mind a day when I get out. What would you say to Caroline?
Yeah, I'd say he's definitely not alone. And actually, that point on cricket's so brutal. You don't get to go and have another turn. Like, you got to
No.
wait, and often watch everybody else and think about what's happened, and it's tough. What I would say is separating that emotion from the instruction is important. You do see it with junior cricket. A child walks off the pitch, they've just got out, parent beeline for them. Why do you play that shot? Or you should have done this, and it's just not the time. You really want, I think ideally you deal with that emotion first. You know, I can see you're frustrated, but that's okay. It's totally okay to be annoyed or upset when you get out. I think that's valid. I think we all probably feel it, but show it to different levels. And like we talked about on our resilience episode, processing it and riding that wave of that emotion is really important, rather than trying to fix it with some advice or whatever that they probably don't need. I would say for a child, supporting them to reflect after their game. We talk about this quite a lot with a lot of our clients at all levels. You know, keep it really simple, something that went well, and then something to take away for next time. You know, that's kind of sufficient, because often when something goes wrong, like we get out, that can kind of open a bit of a loop in our head that we feel we need to fix, so we can keep coming back to it all day. Why did I get out? What happened? Frustration, annoyance, confusion, all of that. But by recognizing, well, I did this well, and actually, and you've talked about this a lot before, Nathan, failure is learning, right? If we're calling it failure. So actually what I've learned is I don't necessarily play the straight ball very well. So what am I going to do next time? I'm going to go away and work on the straight ball. And then you can kind of close that loop in your head, because you've got a bit of a plan, you know what you're doing, you've reflected. And as a parent, you're in a really good position to support that process and contain it a little bit. So emotion first, let them ride it out for a little bit. And then you go into that little bit of purposeful, intentional reflection, and then you try and move on from it. And hopefully that should contain the upset a little bit more, because you don't, especially if it's junior cricket and you finish at noon, you don't want his whole day to be ruined. That's beyond the pale, really. So if we can contain it, kind of close that internal loop, and then try and do something nice later in the day or move on, that would be what I would advise. And it might be hard at the beginning, you might keep coming back to it, but if you can just remind him, well, we know what we're doing, we can move on, you might find over time that feels more manageable for him.
It's a natural emotion, isn't it, for him to be upset when he's out?
Of course.
Who isn't upset? And he cares, doesn't he? He wants to do well.
Yeah.
But what's happening is that when he gets out, he's becoming kind of cooked, isn't he? Overloaded emotionally, which means that he's not rejecting Caroline's advice. He just can't hear you in that moment. So like you said, space, time, settle down. John Neal was on the podcast a few weeks ago, wasn't he? And he talked about be a parent in that moment, so the most important thing, protect your relationship first. The most important thing is that you is parent before being is coached. If every, car journey becomes a debrief, they'll start to associate cricket with pressure. So sometimes the best thing you can do is to talk about anything but cricket. And then that often creates the space for him to come back to it when he wants to, and probably more positively. But it's difficult, isn't it? Cricket's can be such a frustrating game.
It can, and it's so tempting when someone's upset or annoyed to go, oh, but it was a good ball. Oh, but you got X number of runs. Oh, but this. And again, like we said in the resilience episode, that's not very helpful. It's perfectly all right to sit there on the sideline with your child and go, that was rubbish. Like, I completely understand that you feel frustrated. Like, just sit in it with them, like be there with them as they're feeling those things. And just ride the wave, and they'll get more comfortable with that feeling over time.
Mm. And I think once emotions have calmed down, maybe the next practice that player has, maybe focus in on that specifically, because it's one thing having the time to come down emotionally, but actually it will still be nagging in the player's mind, particularly further up if they're more experienced as a player, why they're getting out like that if it's a pattern, and doing something about it can often help, not just from a technical perspective and a skill perspective, but from a mental perspective. Action often helps, doesn't it? But you've got to be in the right space to
Yeah,
do it.
it closes that mental loop to have a plan about something
Yeah,
that's not going your
that's
way.
right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, next question.
Next question.
Right, this comes from Sully via Instagram. So I play for several teams, which include my school, my club, and my county, and I get lots of advice from different coaches. Last week, I was told by one of my coaches to bowl as fast as I can, and then I was told to slow down by another coach. Both are good coaches, but I find it confusing and don't know what to do when I get opposite advice. Please help. This is actually really funny. I was at an indoor game like last year or something, and the children were fielding, and one coach walked around the hall and told them all to stand forward from the netting. It was a netted indoor thing, because then they could be better able to catch it if it bounced off the netting. And then I watched the other coach walk around the hall exactly the same afterwards and tell them to lean back against the netting so they could come forward as they were walking in. And I just stood there watching them do it. And the children, none of them challenged it. None of them said, well, he just told me that. They all just did what the most recent one had told them. And it was quite funny to sort of see it in action, just like Sully here is talking about.
No, that's a brilliant story, and it's a common issue, isn't it? And I think it's an issue that is becoming much more common because there are so many coaches who are now available to players, and more coaches equals more opinions. So for me, it comes down to gaining clarity. So a bit like you were talking about there, having a filter and taking responsibility or ownership of your own game. So when I talk about clarity, whenever a coach gives you some advice, like that example that you were giving there, make sure that you are very clear on what the advice is, but crucially, why are they giving it? So in his example, I think he said that one of his coaches said bowl fast, and the other one said slow down. Well, that might be because one is focusing on developing your pace, Sully, whereas the other one might be worried that, I don't know, you bowl into a batter who can't handle your pace. And so it might not be anything about you.
It's a good
So
point.
clarity in terms of what and why the coach is saying is really important. As for the filter, unfortunately, the truth is that the more coaches you encounter, the higher the risk of getting some poor advice. It's all well-meaning, but it might be, maybe a better way of putting this is, maybe it's advice that isn't right for you because maybe that coach doesn't know you well enough. But either way, you could get advice that doesn't benefit you. And I think that the reality is that if you, as a player, try to implement everything that every coach says to you, you'll soon become confused. And Briony, you alluded to it there, that it's very, very difficult, isn't it, when you're a young player making their way and you're wanting to impress, everybody around, not least your coach. Sometimes, always the coach in that environment is older than you, probably more experienced than you, maybe has a profile. But it's very difficult to challenge somebody like that in the moment. But the truth is that you don't need to follow everything that a coach says. So easier said than done, but choose wisely when it comes to who you take your advice from. And even when that advice is coming from someone that you trust. You still need to test it out to make sure it's right for you. And what was the other thing? Ownership. So responsibility. This is a big one. The best players, they don't just they don't just receive coaching; they start coaching themselves. And over time, I think you want to. And I don't know. Do we know how old Sully is? I don't think he mentioned
Didn't say.
Over time, you want to move away from being told what to do to understanding your own game, so that you can analyze your own game in order to be able to adjust things, especially when you're in a match, because you won't have the coach there. Would you agree with that, Brian? Anything to add?
Yeah, I would. And I think actually what's maybe less helpful is that sometimes coaches feel the need to add value. And I think adding value can be interpreted as shouting instruction every ball or whatever it might be. And I think that can compound this further and make it more confusing and make it harder to take ownership.
So I'm just writing that down about the add value, because when I was going through that level 4 journey, you have to come up with a coaching philosophy, and you have an interview and you do a presentation. And I came up with this line with my coaching philosophy: I want to add value, not interference, i.e. sometimes less is more. And I think that you're absolutely right. I've seen so many coaches now over the years who, because they get in that position of responsibility, they might be getting paid, there might be a parent over the shoulder, they want to be seen to be adding value in their mind. And in their mind, adding value is noise and intervention and saying stuff and doing stuff and getting the player to change things. And often that's the last thing that you need. So yeah, great advice there from you.
So how would you flip this question to give advice to coaches if they're working with a player that they know has multiple coaches? Is there any advice you would have to a coach in that position about how to navigate that situation to avoid confusing and overwhelming the player?
Well, there's an old phrase: before rushing to judgment, seek understanding. And what I mean by that in this context is, if you know that a player is working with other coaches, if it's possible, reach out to those other coaches and say, I'm working with Sully in this context. I'd like to know what you've been working on, etc. Are there any areas that I need to be aware of? So you get that information. Now, I appreciate that sometimes that's not possible. So ask the player, what have you been working on with the coach, and why is that? Just try and arm yourself with as much information as you possibly can, so that you can add that value, not just add another layer of technical complexity. Understanding your player is so important, and what they're doing in different contexts. It's very easy just to work in isolation as a coach. And I do think that we've always got to remember that the player sits at the centre of this, not the coach. And I think that's why actually some of the great coaches are quite modest and humble. You know, it's about the player, not them. So remember that it's all about the player, and then actually finding as much information around that player in terms of their support work, their support network, and information that you can gather. So it might be a conversation with a parent. I understand that Billy's working with Jane. What's going on? What do I need to understand? So get understanding. A long-winded way, Bryony.
Yeah. Seek understanding, sort of avoid just instructing from the get-go.
Yeah. So Peter Moores used to talk about when he first started in the game, a coach was there to give information to the player. You know, this is what I know. This is all the knowledge that I've got, and here it is. And actually, as he evolved his coaching, he suddenly realised, actually, my job's not to throw everything that I've got onto the player. It's to kind of draw out from the player what's already in there
Yeah.
and then help them and support them with that. And if they need a bit of extra stuff, then you give it them. But that would be the first port of call. And I think that's great advice, actually.
I agree. Really useful.
So, yeah, Sully, all the best for the season. Thanks for sending in a great question. Let us know how you get on. Be interested to find out. Right, final question, Bryony, and this has come in via Jacob T, and that's on TikTok, which we've kind of just started having a go at. And yeah, he asks, my daughter is 11 and has just started playing hardball. She loves bowling, and she used to love batting when she played softball, but now she is scared of the ball. Do you have any ideas on how we can work through this? She was a strong batter in softball, and now she says she hates batting. Bryony, how
Bless
do we
her.
help?
This is such a common thing. I'm based in Middlesex, and we have, for girls, we last year and previously we had under 10 and under 12 softball, and under 11 and under 13 and under 15 hardball. So they still had that little bit longer of having kind of a bit of softball for the fun. But this first year, we've under 10 softball, and then it's all hardball from there. So it's tough. And I think a problem in kind of development cricket at the moment is people seem really rush into hardball before they have the foundations of softball. And so they're not holding the bat properly, and therefore it feels really heavy, or they're hitting the edge of it a lot and it's maybe ricocheting onto them. And then those fundamentals do need to be there, in part for confidence. It's a hell of a lot to have a child who's got a plastic bat that weighs nothing and they're hitting a slow wind ball that's sort of looping down, and they feel amazing. And then not only do you have a very hard ball which comes in quicker, you have a very heavy bat, a helmet, pads, gloves. It's a lot of components that are making this more challenging and less fun, arguably. So I would strip it right back. I would be going pads, helmet, gloves, bat. Make sure they've got a bat that's not too heavy. That's, again, something you see, and it just puts them off because they can't use it. You want that good stance. Probably at that age, girls, you want the bat nice and high so it feels light. And they want to be hitting through the ball as well, not just stopping, because it's not going to go anywhere if an under 11. And I would be starting with maybe bowling machine balls if you have access. I really like them as a starting point because you can feed them low, below knee height, and you can really make sure that the fundamentals are there, are stepping to the ball, stepping forward, getting your weight forward and hitting through the ball in your pads with a wooden bat. Get used to the heat that the helmet adds, that maybe it affects your visibility in some ways. Get used to the feeling of the big old pads that are probably brand new, so really stiff and hard to move in. Just getting used to all of the gear and the movement that they are aiming to do. And then you can start moving up a little bit up the kind of ladder, and then you can go a hard ball, underarm feed it. The same movement as they're doing with the bowling machine ball, getting forward, hitting through the ball. Because I think something that you see quite a lot if they haven't gone through the stages is legs are locked. They're not stepping to the ball. They lean back, they hit it, and it kind of goes up in the air. It doesn't feel very nice. But if you can get them in a good position, then actually when the ball comes in quickly and they're moving towards it, they can feel empowered, they can get a bit more confident, they can see that it actually moves, they can hit it hard, and they can feel a bit more kind of confident and in control. So I'd move up the ladder that way. And then if you need to add another step of bowlers using an incredible, that can be another step. But I wouldn't rush the process. I'd really break it down to make sure that their movements are right first and that they're comfortable in the equipment before you add in a bowler that feels really quick at you, because it's just such a big jump. And I've heard so many times girls who do this transition say, I like bowling hardball, but I like batting softball. And it's because they've just been chucked in at the deep end. So if you have the time, Jacob, and you probably are invested in your daughter enjoying her cricket, I would just have go down to the local park or nets or whatever, strip it back a few times and try and instill that confidence and enjoyment of it. Because I think she may hate batting forevermore, but you might be able to bring that joy back if you move through those stages and she realizes that actually if she can step forward and hit the ball cleanly, it can go much further than it can in softball, and it can give her a real sense of satisfaction.
So I think we as adults, those people who've played cricket for a long time, seasoned cricketers, coaches long in the tooth, I think we forget about how difficult it is when you first put that kit on, because it changes your balance. It feels alien. And actually, I'm just thinking back now as to when I was a player. Actually, when I got a new bit of kit, that felt awful. And I might have been wearing it for 15 years, kit. But if I got a new pair of pads, they used to be very stiff.
Yeah, so
and I used to spend a lot of time actually putting bands around the pads so they'd shape round my legs, so they'd feel a bit more comfortable, and actually wearing them around the house. And I think that all that advice that you were saying was absolutely fantastic and spot on. And I would add that if you're a parent listening to this and you've bought all the new kit for, your son or your daughter, get them to wear it around, the house. Get used to it, because it doesn't just get them used to it. It breaks it in. It softens all the padding and whatnot. And it makes, after a while, they'll start feeling like it's part of them, because eventually it does feel part of you, doesn't it? And putting a helmet on is like this the final part of, right, I'm now walking into battle. I'm a gladiator. But at the start, it's like, crikey, this is heavy on my head and it's affecting my balance and I can't see and all that stuff. We talked about this, didn't we, recently with Laura McLeod, who had quite a lot of advice.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
So if you missed that episode, it might be worth listening to that. I think it's a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, and I think most state schools may do cricket, but they definitely won't. I've never heard of a state primary school doing hardball cricket for girls. And I've heard of relatively few state secondary schools doing hardball cricket for girls. There even some mixed primaries, they'll do hardball cricket with the boys before they do it with the girls. And it's kind of perpetuating this cycle of girls getting into it slightly later, so being maybe pushed in a little bit more, kind of like in at the deep end a little bit more. So I think, yeah, there's more to be done in that area, I would say.
Yeah. It is a big transition. There's no doubt about that. And we've not really talked about the fear factor as well that comes with a hard ball.
Yeah.
A hard ball hurts when it hits you. It's as simple as that. So there's a massive transition here. And I think like you said, staging it appropriately is the best way. I'm not sure it's one of those where you just dive in straight away. You could drown.
Yes.
Right. So that's it, isn't it?
That's it.
We've got no more question. I think so. So that brings us to the end of the show. A big thank you to everyone who sent in a question. I thought they were excellent. What do you think, Joanna?
Really, really good. And yeah, really mixed bag. It just shows how complex cricket is and how many different things affect people across the levels of the game.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there's something in there that that people can take away and apply to their own game, whether that's being a player, a parent, or a coach.
Indeed.
So next week we're joined by a Cheshire player, an all-rounder called Rohan Luthra, and he'll be taking us through his experiences across a lot of different levels of the game, from county age group cricket to Loughborough University, playing for national counties, and life as a club pro. And I've got some stories on that, so it should be interesting. So if you're enjoying the pod, please do subscribe on your favourite platform. All the details are in the show notes. And if you're feeling extra generous, a quick rating and review. Really does help more people to find the podcast. So thanks for listening or watching. Briony, let's call that stumps.
We'll see you next time.